It all started with a plan to avoid a wedding and ended with a truth that came too late. The day Count Augusto de Alencar announced that his daughter would be getting married, it was for Aloa. It was like hearing a sentence that had been written years ago. She was sitting by the window in the parlor, absent-mindedly embroidering, when he walked in with steps far too firm for an ordinary conversation. "I received a proposal," he said, without beating around the bush, "and I've already given my answer." Aloa slowly raised her eyes. "May I know what it was?" He said, "I've already accepted." The needle then slipped from her fingers. "Accepted what, Papa?" "Your marriage to Lord Bartolomeo Vance. The union will take place at the end of the season." That name brought with it a chill. Aloa knew the man. Rigid, calculating, much older, and with eyes that always seemed to be sizing up people's worth. "He's old enough to be my father. And besides, I don't love him. I don't even really know him. I've only seen him once," she said, desperate to her father. The Count then sighed, like someone explaining something obvious to a child. "Love doesn't support a family, Aloa. Stability does, and we need that." She didn't answer, because she knew that in that society, women's protests rarely changed decisions. But that night, lying in bed, staring at the dark ceiling of her room, an idea began to take shape. It was a risky idea that could only work with one person. She then found him the next day in the old Palmer behind her property. It was the place where, as children, they had spent entire afternoons inventing adventures, building wooden forts, and promising to always protect each other. He was still there. Not in the orchard, but in her life. Mateus Valenca, son of an old friend of the Count, raised practically alongside Aloa. He was now a respected young man, heir to a considerable fortune, and known for his discreet demeanor. He was standing there, perched on the trunk of a beautiful tree, when he saw her approaching. His face lit up immediately, and he gave that same calm smile he always had. "Aloa, you look like you're about to declare war." And then he smiled at her. She took a deep breath and said, "I need your help." Mateus immediately closed the book and replied, "You've always had my help." She hesitated for just a moment before speaking. "I want you to pretend to be in love with me." The silence that followed was so sudden that even the birds seemed to stop singing. Mateus blinked as if he had heard something wrong. "Pretend?" "Yeah, my father wants me to marry Lord Vance. If society believes I'm involved with you, he won't be able to insist without causing a scandal." Mateus watched her for a long moment. She didn't notice, but in that instant, his heart felt like it was fighting against his own ribs. "So that's it. So you want a show?" "I want freedom," she replied. He smiled softly, but there was something painful in that smile. Mateus then closed his eyes for a second, then agreed. "All right, let's pretend." The plan started right away. Walks together, shared laughter, lingering glances. Everything seemed natural, maybe a little too natural. Because for Aloa, it wasn't hard to act affectionately towards someone who had always been her safe harbor, her refuge. But for Mateus, it was like living a dream he knew had an expiration date. He watched her laugh at the dances and thought he could spend his whole life just watching that smile. He listened to her talk about her plans for freedom, to travel, to study, to choose her own path. And he felt proud, but sad at the same time, because he knew that when all of this was over, she would leave, and she would never love him the way he loved her. The first crack in their agreement appeared on a quiet night. They were walking through the garden after a dance. Ayla was excitedly talking about how the plan was working. "Look, Mateus, my father hasn't mentioned marriage in days. I think we get it." "And then?" he asked. "Then?" "Yes, Aloa, after, when it's all over, when you're free. What will happen to us?" She just laughed, carefree. "Will we go on, just like we've always this? Friends?" The word hit Mateus like a gentle but inevitable blow. He nodded. Of course, friends. Those words were like an arrow to Mateus's heart. That was all he would ever be to her, just a friend. 6 weeks later, Aloha found Mateus in the same orchard where it had all begun. The afternoon sun filtered through the tree leaves, scattering golden patches across the ground. When she came closer, he turned his face and smiled, the same gentle smile as always, but now there was something quieter about him. Now, did you look for me with such urgency? He said. Did something happen? She took a deep breath, breathing in the joy that barely sit inside her. Something did happen, and it's wonderful. He waited, and she went on. My father's getting married this weekend. He made an excellent deal. Our family is safe now. There's no more need for alliances or prayers. Mateus remained silent for a moment. So that means... She then felt relieved. Yes, it means we're free, Mateus. Completely free. We don't have to pretend anymore. Mateus looked away toward the trees, took a deep breath, and said, That's great. I'm happy for you all. She smiled, not noticing the weight behind that response. Oh, Mateus, I really want to thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. It was the most generous thing anyone's ever done for me. He let out a small, quiet laugh. I've always wanted to help you, he said. And now we'll just go on as always, said Eloa, naturally. Friends, adventure partners, nothing will change between us. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if those words cut right through him. When he opened his eyes again, the smile was still there, but more distant. Of course, he replied. Nothing will change, but it already has. In the days that followed, Aloha started to notice. Mateus didn't show up as often anymore. Visits became rare, casual encounters non-existent. When they met at social events, he was cordial, polite, as kind as ever, but formal, almost like a stranger. There were no more lingering glances, nor conversations that stretched late into the night, and even less that calm feeling that he was always there. She tried to ignore it at first. She thought he was just busy, that it was only a phase. But his absence started to bother her in a strange way, hard to put into words. One afternoon, when she casually mentioned to her father that she hadn't seen Mateus in weeks, she got nothing but a silent look in response. Months went by, until one morning the Count walked into the room with the newspaper in his hands and a curious look on his face. Elo, he said, it looks like your friend is about to get married. He looked up, not understanding. What? Mateus, you're 5. He's engaged to Lady Deborah. The news is all over the society pages. Engaged? The shock was immediate, almost physical. Yes, engaged. You didn't expect that after you ended his courtship, he'd stay single forever, did you? Aloha wasn't surprised that he was getting married. After all, he was a good guy, and it was only natural for that to happen. But it was because he hadn't said anything. Nothing. An unexpected feeling of betrayal rose in her chest. That very afternoon, Eloa went to look for him. She went to his estate. When he saw her, he seemed genuinely surprised. Eloa, are you getting married? She asked, straight to the point. He was silent for a moment and then nodded. Yes, I am. And you didn't think you should tell me? There was clear hurt in her voice. He took a deep breath before answering. Look, Loa, I meant to tell you, but I thought it wasn't something urgent for you. It wasn't urgent? She repeated, incredulous. Mateus, we're friends. You've always told me everything. Then he said, you had so many things to take care of. Your plans, your freedom, your travels. I didn't want to bother you with my stories. His words were gentle, but they created a huge distance between them. Eloa felt her heart tighten. I deserve to hear it from you, she said, hurt. Yes, you really did deserve that, he replied in a low voice. But he didn't add anything else. He didn't try to explain, didn't try to get closer. And for the first time since they'd met, there was an invisible wall between them. She went home with a strange feeling in her chest, a mix of sadness and irritation, and something deeper that she still couldn't understand. Something that was starting to hurt, but it was already too late. A few days later, Aloha was sitting in the dining room by the window, quietly embroidering. The automatic movement of the needle was almost the only thing that kept her calm lately. Her father was sitting across from her, settled into another armchair, reading the newspaper while sipping his tea. The atmosphere was peaceful. Until he spoke, suddenly, as if making a simple comment. "I thought you were really gonna marry him." She looked up, confused. "Yeah? Lord Bartholomew? Dad, I thought we had already dropped that subject." And, "No, sweetheart," he interrupted in. "With Matthias." That name made her heart skip a beat. "Matthias? Oh, there's something I wanted to tell you." She took a breath, a deep one, and explained everything. The whole plan, the agreement, the act, the fear she felt at the time, how it had all just been a performance to stop the arranged marriage. When she finished, the silence in the room grew heavy. The Count stared at her seriously. "Oh, what?" he repeated, his voice hardening. "Do you realize that if anyone found out about this, it would ruin our family's reputation?" She lowered her head. "Forgive me, Dad. I was desperate." He stood up, irritated. "You need to stop being so reckless. Besides, if you stopped thinking only about yourself, you'd see that the only one pretending in this whole story was you. No one here was playing around." Aloha felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean, Dad?" He fell silent for a moment, as if he had said more than he meant to. Then he ran a hand over his tired face. "Look, Aloha, I don't want to talk about this anymore. This conversation has worn me out." He turned around and sat back down. He picked up the newspaper again, as if he wanted to forcefully end the conversation. But for her, nothing was over. On the contrary, his words kept echoing in her head nonstop. The only one pretending was you. Aloha stayed still, staring at the embroidery, but not really seeing it. Many memories started to fall into place inside her, like pieces that were finally finding the right spot. The way Matthias always showed up when she needed him, his quiet care, the question in the garden, and then after. The sad smile when she said friends, a painful feeling then rose up in her chest. And she remembered how she felt when she heard about his engagement. It wasn't just surprise, it was pain, a sudden, deep, almost physical pain. As if something had been ripped away from her before she even realized it belonged to her. Was the feeling really just friendship? But if it wasn't just that, now it was too late to do anything about it since he was engaged. A stab of regret pierced her chest. And finally, she understood what her father had meant. The only one pretending was her. And maybe she wasn't even pretending at all. The week went by. Aloha tried to stick to her plans. She talked about traveling, about independence, about studying abroad. She told herself that this was what she had always wanted. But none of those ideas could fill the silence Matthias had left behind. Until one morning an invitation arrived. A wedding invitation. From Matthias and Deborah. Ela then stared at the paper for a long time. She spent a whole weekend completely unable to decide what to do. She barely slept, hardly ate, and spent hours staring out the window, as if the answer was hidden somewhere far off on the horizon. She kept asking herself over and over, would she let him get married without a fight? Was she about to lose the love of her life? But then another, even harder question came up. Would it be fair to interfere? Fair to his fiancée, a woman who wasn't to blame for any of this? Fair to Matthias himself, who had already suffered from waiting for something she never gave him? Fair, after she'd had so many chances and just never realized it? The truth was harsh. He hadn't lost her by accident. She lost him because she took too long. During sleepless nights, Eloa felt the weight of her conscience growing inside her. Until, in a quiet dawn, she made her decision. She couldn't pull him out of another life, but she couldn't pretend she didn't feel anything either. So she decided to do the only honest thing left to her: tell the truth and leave. On the morning of her trip, she left a letter, simple and direct, but written with every part of her heart. The letter said, "Mateus, it took me too long to understand something that was always right in front of me, and this is the hardest truth I've ever had to admit. You were never just my friend. You were always my home, and I only realized that too late. I'm sorry for being blind, proud, and foolish enough not to see how much you loved me. I'm not writing to ask you for anything, nor do I have the right to ask. I'm writing this just so you know. I love you. I've always loved it. Even when I didn't know what to name what I was feeling. I'm leaving today. I need to learn to live with my choices. Be happy, Matthew. Even if that happiness doesn't include me. Your Eloa." When Matthew received the letter, he felt the world stop. He read it once, then again, and again. His heart was beating so hard he could barely breathe. When he got to the end, he didn't think twice. He went to his fiancée Deborah's house and broke off the engagement. He apologized, but explained to her that he couldn't tie her to a loveless marriage, that he admired her and was sure she would find a man who would give her everything she deserved. Then he ran to Eloa's house, but she had already left. A servant informed him. Miss Eloa went to the port. Mateus then went straight there. Boarding had already started. The port was chaotic. People everywhere, luggage, goodbyes, voices and whistles. He searched for her in the crowd, as if his very life depended on it. Boarding was almost over when he made an impulsive decision. He bought a ticket on the spot. No luggage, no plan, not thinking about tomorrow. He just boarded the ship and started looking for her. And he found her at the bow, alone. The wind blowing through her hair as she gazed at the horizon, just like she did when she was trying to make sense of her own life. "Eloa," he said. She turned around slowly and froze. Her eyes widened at the sight of him. "Mateus?" For a moment, neither of them could speak. Reality seemed just too impossible. He took a deep breath, still out of breath. "I was reading your letter." Her eyes were already brimming with tears. I didn't want to complicate your life," she said. "I just needed you to know." He took a step closer. "And you think this complicates my life?" She didn't answer. He then spoke with an intensity he had never dared to show before. "Eloa, I spent years loving you in silence, hoping that one day you would love me and see me in the same way. When you said we were just friends, I accepted it because I loved you more than I loved myself. And I tried to move on, but I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." A tear then slid down her face. "I thought I had lost you forever," said Eloa, unable to hold back her tears any longer. And finally, they kissed. The kiss Mateus had waited his whole life for. The kiss Eloa never imagined she would have. The one that brought no doubts, no rush, no fear, only the calm certainty of finally having found the place where her heart had always belonged. The ship sounded its horn. Slowly, it began to pull away from the port. Eloa looked around, confused. Mateus, his bags, his things, his life. He smiled and simply said, "Everything I need is right here in front of me." E chegamos ao fim de mais uma história aqui no nosso canal. E se você gostou dessa história, já se inscreve no canal, deixa aquele like e comente aqui embaixo se você quer mais histórias estilo Bridgerton. Mas agora eu quero saber de você. Você já perdeu um grande amor por demorar demais para entender o que sentia? Deixa aqui embaixo a sua opinião nos comentários. E não se esqueça, ative todas as notificações para não perder nenhuma história. Temos histórias novas toda semana. Um beijo e até a próxima!